This is Lauren Lester, the voice of Robin and Nightwing, and you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app. And remember, no one can be a boy wonder forever.
5 young fighters drawn from the corners of the universe. When they band together, they become the world's most superb fighting force and take on the Earth's toughest challenges, like finding the remote control.
How could you lose the remote?
What makes you so sure I lost it?
Starfire.
You must meet my friends.
Cyborg.
Oh yeah, back in the lead.
Beast Boy.
Yo, whose turn to do dishes?
Raven.
This party is pointless.
Everything's pointless. Want to go talk about it?
And Robin.
Loser.
Jerk. What did you say?
In a new series about fighting for truth, justice, and the last slice of pizza. Teen Titans.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 212 of the DCAU Review. I am one of your hosts, Cal, and with me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account, our other host. It's Liam. Liam, welcome to the month of June. Welcome to a very special Elseworlds month. As we discussed on last week's episode, we're doing something that feels very overdue based on the importance of this character. But welcome to the first week of June 2022 of the DCAU Review.
That's right, Cal. As mentioned, this is our sort of we do these Elseworlds reviews, a few times every year. Usually, it's in a month where we have 5 Saturdays, but about once a year, we also like to do one full month of Elseworlds reviews with some sort of theme. And this year, we picked a character as our theme, and that being the character of the Boy Wonder himself, Robin. And we are kicking that off this week with a Teen Titans episode, only the second episode of the series we've ever reviewed in our 212 episodes, and it's a pretty fun one and a appropriately Robin-centered episode in Masks.
That is correct, Liam. And before we get into breaking down this week's episode, as we do with each and every episode with our 4 categories, we will, of course, get the official Internet Movie Database synopsis. And that, of course, is brought to you by The Pod Tower. That's right. Check out our full back catalog of every episode, including that aforementioned Teen Titans review, all at youtube.com/The Pod Tower. And guess what? Not only do you get great content from us, but you get some from our friends also who have done content on Teen Titans, I'm sure, as well. So check that out at youtube.com/The Pod Tower. And Liam, before we get to this week's IMDb synopsis, I will mention that this episode originally premiered here in the States on the Cartoon Network back on September the 20th, 2003, meaning we're just a few short months away here from the 19-year anniversary of this episode's premiere. Man, make you feel old yet?
A little bit, yeah, definitely. So that'll be the synopsis for the episode Masks, which is written by Tom Pugsley and Greg Klein, directed by Michael Chang, with music by Michael McQuistion and animation by Lotto Animation Inc. And that synopsis reads as such. Robin is obsessed with finding Slade. Then a new criminal shows up, Red X. Red X goes on missions stealing equipment for Slade. The Titans try to stop Red X, but he seems to be one head. Okay, I see why I was having trouble with this, because it's a bad sentence. All right. The Titans try to stop Red X, but he seems to be one step ahead of the Titans.
Oh no. You used the same subject twice in the same sentence. Yeah, nope, not good. That was very wordy. It was very choppy at times. Felt like there were some sentences that could be combined there. It felt like they had to fill up a lot of space. So, it's one of those that, okay, this paragraph has to have at least 50 words in it. So I'm going to break this up by restating the same thing several times and using more words to describe the same thing.
Absolutely. Yes. A very, definitely a word count filling synopsis this week. But that does bring us into our plot here is, we kick it off just like right in the middle. That is something that I feel like coming back to the show, especially the earliest episodes of this show, we're still in the first season here. We really just get right into the action right off the bat on this show.
Yeah, absolutely. So we open and there's this fight happening between the entirety of the Titans, and they are fighting this group of what appears to be lackeys belonging to Slade. They very much match Slade's style of clothing, and it's quite obvious that these are his lackeys, and so they are attempting to steal what appears to be a red floppy disk. I'm not sure. It's never. They call them computer chips, I believe.
Yes.
Never really described as to what their purpose is, what they're stealing from, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But this leads to the first clash between the Titans and this group of lackeys. And right before we get to the break for our opening credits, and quite arguably the greatest musical intro of all time that we of course will once again touch upon in our music category, we have the lackeys getting the better of the Titans and beginning their escape with the chip in hand after getting the better of them. So Titans go, of course, is the scream as Robin leads the Titans after these lackeys. And in their escape, Robin comes into contact with one that sort of gets the better of Starfire, knocking her off the edge of a cliff. And this causes Robin to have to leap to save her. He uses one of his many gadgets from his belt to both latch onto her and actually onto the escaping lackey. And he actually is able to finally catch up to him as after some traversing over some bodies of water and eventually crash landing. It appears that Robin gets his hand and is ready to thoroughly interrogate the gentleman to find out just, of course, what he knows about Slade, who, of course, is the overarching villain for this season and the main antagonist. And Robin's main focus for the majority of this season is just determining who Slade is and what he wants, what his plan is, and getting to the bottom of it. And once again, he's foiled by Slade as he comes to rip off the mask of this lackey. And it turns out it is, in fact, artificial intelligence. It's a robot, and he comes face to face not with a human but a screen, and Slade's face being projected onto the screen as he once again taunts Robin that he's not quite there yet. He's a fair try this time, but he's not quite ready to face Slade face to face.
Now talk! Who's Slade? Why does he want this chip? And why are you working for him?
Excellent work, Robin.
Slade.
Really? I think your skills are improving.
No more games. What do you want?
But you do lack patience. If you're really so curious about my intentions, perhaps we should meet, face to face.
Tell me where you're hiding and I'll be there in a heartbeat.
Patience, Robin. Patience.
Robin?
And this, of course, leads Robin to much frustration as we very much get the point of that is in our next scene as we arrive back at Titan's Tower.
That's right. Yeah, that's kind of where we get our thread for the rest of this episode is that, Robin's he's the obsessed police detective in like a Saw movie or Seven or any of those things where he's on this case and he's chasing down the perp and he just can't do anything. He can't enjoy anything. He's just so consumed by this Slade character. And we see that sort of illustrated as the rest of the Titans are kind of kicking back, looking to relax and sort of unwind after their battle. And Robin is still in his room looking over case files, and Starfire tries to sort of get him to come and socialize and relax, but he just won't hear it.
Robin, is that the best you can do? Excellent work, Robin. I think your skills are improving. If you're really so curious about my intentions, perhaps we should meet face to face.
Who are you?
Robin? I am wondering if you might wish to...
No. Thanks. But I need to figure out why Slade wanted that chip.
Agreed. And perhaps if you were to take a break, the answer would be easier to...
I can't. You almost got hurt. Next time it could be worse. He's planning something. I have to find out what.
But Robin, I am sure that...
It's just made very clear very quickly that Robin is just completely obsessed with this case, and that is evident as we then see we go back to that facility where this red computer chip is still floating after the Titans were able to stop Slade's minions from getting it, and a mysterious new character shows up who we will come to find is known as Red X. And as this Red X is escaping, we see that the Titans are on the scene again, minus Robin, who is working a Slade lead on the other side of town, apparently. And very quickly, it's shown that the Red X is not only does he have a lot of cool X-themed gadgets that we'll certainly talk about more in visuals, but he specifically has gadgets with every single one of the Titans' weaknesses in mind. And so he very quickly dispatches them and escapes with the first of what we will find out is 3 computer chips. And we go back to the tower, and Beast Boy is still getting this red sticky substance that kept him at bay, cut out of his hair by Starfire, which I think is a really funny bit. And they're sort of complaining about talking about how frustrated they are how this guy just took them apart, and Robin sort of apologizes for not being there, but then before they can really unpack anything that Robin's going through, he's right back to work and leaves the room, and it's becoming very clear that it feels like Robin is sort of distancing himself from the team. And before you can really start to put these notes together, we cut later in the evening as the Titans hear an alert, and they come back to their main sort of living room, and they hear that Robin is not in the building, but is in fact off chasing down Red X across town, and the Titans had better get there quick to try to aid in the showdown.
That's right. And right before that, we had this scene that sort of set up Red X a little bit and showed his motivations for stealing this chip that Slade was after in the first scene. And he is able to get in contact with Slade and begin to strike up a deal and offer a partnership. Slade, while very impressed with him, is not quite ready to join forces just yet. There's some dialogue that's had and some intrigue on Slade's part, but he needs to see more. So he tasks Red X with more tasks, I guess. Tasks him with more tasks. I just did what the synopsis did. He tasks him with more things to do, and before this partnership can be solidified, he must complete them and prove himself worthy.
Rumor has it you're interested in this.
I'm interested in many things, Mr.
X. Red X.
Catchy. So, are you proposing a sale or a gift?
A partnership. I give you the chip. You cut me in on your plans.
Partnership? My. We are ambitious. But an alliance cannot be forged from one small chip. If you're going to win my trust, I'll require more.
Just tell me what you want.
So, as you mentioned, Robin is chasing down, apparently, and has spotted Red X stealing this a second computer chip downtown, and the rest of the Titans rush to join him. And as they get there, they see Robin chasing after Red X, but he's quickly contained by a net that Red X has thrown on top of him. After checking to make sure he's okay, the Titans pursue Red X, and they have another battle between them and Red X in the subway. And we learn something pretty interesting here. The Titans know how to adapt. I appreciate this. I thought that was really interesting. Red X seems to try some of the same tactics that he had before, and the Titans have quickly learned some strategies on how to protect one another and also to protect themselves against what happened to them in their first battle. So they begin to seemingly overtake Red X a little bit, but he's too quick, too fast, and begins to outsmart them again, and sort of begins getting the best of them, including knocking Beast Boy onto the subway tracks. And it appears that Beast Boy may in fact be done for as the train is bearing down on him. But the Red X actually swoops in and saves him, much to his surprise, before giving him another swift kick to the jaw and escaping. So this sort of leads the Titans to sort of scratch their heads and continue to wonder and ponder just who this mysterious being is. So when they get back to Titan's Tower, again, Robin is being very reclusive and standoffish, and it's decided that Starfire, despite her pleads with Robin to join the team and to spend less time focusing on both Red X and Slade to rejoin the team, that Robin again secludes himself. And as she pursues him into his room, she finds that his room is empty. He's no longer there after a few minutes, and she begins looking around at the walls covered in all of these newspaper clippings and the very obsessed type nature that Robin's room appears to have when it comes to discovering who Slade is. And she looks at this table that has a broken Bertarang on it, and it also has this sphere that she inadvertently knocks off.
Who's Slade?
You almost got hurt. Next time it could be
Nothing.
worse.
Lead was a dead end.
Close to a breakthrough.
Sure you guys can handle this without me?
Robin, where have you gone?
I'm fine. Get X. Go.
Huh? Robin?
I'm fine. Get X. Go. I'm fine. Get X. Go.
If you were not really there, then where were...
When she knocks it off, it projects what appears to be Robin encased in a net, and it replays the same vocal message that they had heard before, just in the midst of the battle of pursuing Red X in the subway. So she begins to put the pieces together and realize that Robin, may in fact be Red X himself, which kind of leads us to the culmination in the final scene, as Robin, or Red X rather, has to continue to prove his worth to Slade and collect the final of our 3 computer chips.
Yes, color coordinated as they are for so we know they're
in track. Yep,
exactly. So yes, as Red X arrives and grabs the last chip, we see that not only have Slade's minions come to meet him, but Slade himself actually has made an appearance, one of his first sort of in-person appearances, or at least so it would seem at first. And they sort of have this dialogue, and Robin as Red X is continually trying to get Slade to reveal this plan that he has, why he needs the chips, what his sort of long-term goals are. And it's at that point that Slade makes it very clear that he has not been fooled, and he in fact knew that Red X and Robin were one and the same. So one of his minions shoots this like net gun that catches all of the chips and then flies it into Slade's hands. And just at this moment, the Titans burst in, or at least 3 of the Titans do, Cyborg, Raven, and Beast Boy. And as Red X sort of goes to run after Slade, who begins to sort of retreat as the Titans begin to engage all of these robots and these giant like mech things that Slade has brought. Cyborg grabs a handful of Red X's cape, and that's when sort of Starfire swoops in to reveal to the rest of the team that in fact Red X and Robin are one and the same. So Red X tears off his mask to reveal Robin. Always love a guy wearing a mask under another mask. That's always always mask. Great bit. And yes, so Red X runs away as the rest of the Titans are sort of gobsmacked for a moment before realizing they're still in quite a bit of danger as they're sort of left to deal with all of Slade's minions and robots. Meanwhile, Robin and Slade sort of set up our finale here as they have a pretty intense chase scene. Again, we'll certainly talk a lot more about that in visuals, but they're sort of running over rooftops, and Slade is just, metaphorically and literally one step ahead of Robin every time. And they finally get to the point where they're going to have their showdown. And Slade is sort of, again, just so quick and so ferocious that Robin seems overmatched. And in fact, he actually knocks Robin off of the top of the building. Robin tries to hold onto the ledge, but it begins to crumble. And mirroring Red X saving Beast Boy earlier in the episode, Slade actually saves Robin. Mm-hmm. And there's sort of a moment of confusion as Robin doesn't understand what's happened here, and Slade sort of tries to play it off that he's just not finished with teaching Robin this lesson, and that sort of gives Robin his second win. He's able to knock Slade down, and the chips go flying, and it seems like Robin has Slade dead to rights after all this time. But once again, Chekhov's remove a mask to have a robot underneath twice in one episode. I don't think I'm using that correctly, but yes, once again, just like at the start of the episode when we reveal the robot minions, Slade himself this time is also a robot duplicate.
This ends now.
Patience, Robin. We'll meet face to face some other time. Oh, and speaking of time.
Ha!
At least you didn't get the chips.
And there's a message playing on this little TV screen in the robot's head that tells Robin he is impressed and that they will meet again in due time, just before the robot self-destructs. And so Robin is sort of left being back to square one, even though it seemed like it was almost over, but he's still back to square one. And then interestingly enough, especially I think for a show like this that is so action heavy, as we mentioned, they end on a very quiet moment, which is they go back to the tower, and Starfire sort of gives Robin some food for thought to end our episode.
You want to yell at me too? Everyone else has. And I can't blame them.
I do not wish to yell, merely to understand. Robin, why did you not tell us the truth?
I needed to fool Slade. If you guys knew it was me under that mask, you would have held back. Doesn't matter anyway. Slade figured it out, and I still haven't figured out anything about him.
That is not true. Whoever Slade is, you and he are similar. Slade did not trust you, and you did not trust us.
Yeah, that's right. And it is very interesting. And she does kind of approach Robin and begin to not quite chastise him, but question why he wasn't willing to share and be open with them, that this was his plan. And he claims that the reason why was because he had to make it seem authentic, and he couldn't risk them kind of giving away his cover story. And if he had revealed to them that he was, that he was Red X, and he kind of continues to pound his fist on the desk in frustration and talk about how he feels like he's still back at square one. He still doesn't know who Slade is, doesn't know anything about him, doesn't know his plan, but specifically doesn't know anything about him. And Starfire sort of very, very sharply responds in only the kindest way that Starfire can, that he actually does know something about Slade. He has learned that he and Slade are very similar, and that neither of them trusted those that were closest to them. Slade, of course, not trusting Red X, and Robin not trusting the Titans. So certainly a stab in the front from a friend there, to speak the sharp truth there. And that's kind of where we're left as the scene sort of draws to a close. So Liam, this was not one that I remember. I definitely have seen this episode because I remember Robin getting caught in the net. I remember that being a hologram and all of that. I remember that particular plot point, but I hadn't seen this episode in quite some time, and probably only saw it one or two times prior to this. But man, what a great story. I love the sort of the pace, as you mentioned, doesn't allow you to kind of put two and two together until you're right there discovering it with the Titans that Robin is Red X. They do a lot to not dwell on the fact that they give you the hints and it's easy to kind of see in retrospect, but they don't make it very point blank obvious right at the beginning. And I love the development of this Robin character because it feels very much like somebody that studied under Batman. You can very, very well see this as a Batman obsession. The same characteristics of Batman, putting his friends to the side and behind him, not trusting his friends enough to bring them in on what's going on at the sake of trying to get to this villain is a very Batman type thing. And who better to mimic that than the person that he trained in, that being Robin. So I loved that. I loved Robin's obsessive nature of this, his willingness to kind of go over that line and to blur those lines to try and figure out what he can do to get more information from Slade, or to subvert sort of the idea of just a head-on attack as a hero. So I loved all of that. There's a lot of fun stuff in this episode. What about you? How did you feel about it?
Yeah, this is one I've seen, I think, almost every episode in this first season a lot, because I just watched the show constantly as a youngster, and then certainly when the DVDs came out, the Slade episodes were always pretty heavy in my rotation when I was rewatching the stuff. So I had definitely seen this one a lot. It did strike me that it like unlocked a little bit of like a memory of when I was first watching the show, when I feel like this episode is when it went from a show that I liked because it was superheroes and Robin especially as a character. We've talked about that before. We actually did a whole bonus episode about Robin in animation, which you can find in our archives wherever you listen to podcasts. But this show was cool for that reason. But then it felt like I really felt myself getting sucked in, and I remember feeling that way when I was, whatever I was, 10 or 11 years old, watching this and feeling like, oh, it's not just, good guys punching bad guys. Like there's a really interesting dynamic here where, it's the, don't let yourself become a monster to catch a monster thing. He's pushing people away and doing things that are at the very least unethical, and he's not trusting his friends, and he's not working as part of a team, even though he's supposed to be the leader of this team, all in service allegedly of catching this ultimate villain. And it's sort of driving this wedge. Not only is it, frustrating and everything, it's like, and he does all of this sort of questionable, underhanded stuff, and he doesn't really even get anything out of it. So I feel like there's even if you're a youngster, there's like a lesson there of like, he went against the grain. He tried to do it his own way. He didn't involve his friends. He tried to do it all by himself, and it all sort of blew up in his face. And I just think that's a really like sharp narrative turn, and it sets up, obviously we haven't talked about those episodes yet, but the 2-part season 1 finale where we sort of see the Robin Slade rivalry come to a head. It's all just, this episode is such a great linchpin from the final exam episode that we covered, the first episode of the series where we're just learning about Slade, to where we see this obsession has grown over the rest of the season, and it feels like it's coming to a head here, and he does all of this crazy stuff to try to get the upper hand and to finally catch this guy. and it just blows up in his face. And really all he ends up with is, as he says at the end of the episode, you know, all of his friends yelled at him except for Starfire, who, you know, very, as you said, very, very softly, and we're certainly talk about that in voice acting, but very simply and softly, you know, puts him in his place in a way that only, you know, a good friend can when you've been when you've been a jerk, like, right. And when you've been acting out of turn. So yeah, I just think this is a really great linchpin, and I just felt that switch of like, this is when this show became like my favorite show when I was 10, was I think this episode, and it was really fun kind of reliving that and rediscovering that.
Yeah, it's a boatload of fun. I highly recommend it. I mean, this first season, there are some episodes that are a little bit more on the silly side and less serious, but and it has that lighthearted tone. Even, I mean, there are even some parts of this episode where there's in some momentary lighthearted nature, you know, whether it's the Beast Boy and Cyborg banter, when Beast Boy gets his tongue stepped on when he's an anteater at the beginning, or, you know, there is some lightheartedness. But between this and I know later on in the story, you know, I think it's in the later seasons with Beast Boy and Terra, like there's a lot of dark stuff that comes in the writing, and that really, I feel like, balances that out. And I feel like Teen Titans, at least at first, kind of got branded as more of a kiddie, goofy show. And there's some really good writing that happens. So kudos to both of the writers for this week's episode, and or for the single writer. I can't remember if it was it one or two writers that we had.
It's two. Tom, I might be butchering this, Pugsley or Pugsley, and Greg Klein, both credited for the script for this week.
Yeah, great work from them. You know, I think it was almost flawless. I think, you know, I think that it would be nitpicking kind of to try and figure something out that I didn't like about the way that this episode went. So even that I love how the showdown and the final battle happens, you know, after the rooftop chase, and Robin finally feels like that he's going to have his opportunity to lay his hands on Slade, and it's still a robot. Like, it's still trying to grasp the wind. It's, you know, it keeps falling through his fingers. So I love the frustration in Robin's character, and then him realizing that all of this for nothing. All of this was for nothing, essentially. You know, he borderline betrayed his friends, and still didn't get, you know, much progress in this. So for all of those reasons, I ended up giving plot a very strong 9 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I love it. I went just one tick higher. I went with a perfect 10 out of 10 for my plot score, for just all the reasons we talked about. Like I said, I think it still moves. I think you really hit it when you said they don't give, it's not a mystery box. It's not, they don't go, oh, who's Red X? It doesn't really work that way, because the plot moves so quickly and we move scene to scene, and they do. But just in case you were starting to think, oh wait, Robin wasn't there, and then this Red X guy shows up, but right then you do the twist of the episode. You know, a twist and a turn, not necessarily the same thing as a mystery. So I think that's really fun. It's the difference between, I think, like the newer Star Wars trilogy, where they set up that you know, one of the main characters has secret parents and we don't know who they are, and it's you know, we get a couple different reveals for that across the trilogy, whereas in the original trilogy they tell you that Luke Skywalker's father is dead, and then in the second movie, spoiler alert, for the 1980 film Empire Strikes Back, then we find out that the main villain of the series, Darth Vader, is actually Luke's father. And it wasn't a mystery of, oh, who's Darth Vader's true identity. He was just a bad guy as far as we knew. Right. And then we reveal actually he has this deeply personal connection to so I kind of like the way of that was kind of what this reminded me of. They don't really try to make you puzzle out who Red X is, because as far as you're concerned, it's just a new bad guy. It's just a new bad guy who's helping Slade. And then, you know, they throw you off the scent with having, you know, him and Robin seemingly interact, and then to have that twist be that was just all part of the deception, and Robin was going that far to try to fool not just Slade but his own friends. I think that's really brilliant and really added to it.
Yeah, lots of fun there. very high plot scores to kick things off here. So let's see if that continues in our next category, Liam, which of course is going to be visuals and animation. So I believe you said Lotto Animation was responsible for the work this week. And this is of course the return to the Murakami. Is that what's officially known as here? So we have our East meets West sort of animation styles here clashing by the great legend, DCAU legend, DC animation legend, Glenn Murakami, just a fantastic artist. So of course him mashing these styles together and inspiring and being the producer on the show is kind of put the signature on this show's run. So lots of fun stuff here. I think one of the first things that I noticed, and that is the backgrounds for a lot of the scenes here. I love that in that first scene, I don't think I'm trying to think of a scene in a DCAU show where you had basically a stark white background, like a stark white, all white background. And this computer lab or something like that is what it's representing, where they're battling these robots, but it is bright white. And that's not something you tended to see. And we talked about that. There was a strategy behind that. They hit a lot of things in shadows on those shows, and those shows certain shows were supposed to be darker, but to have a stark white background and have this animation, you have to have some really intense good artwork, I think, against a background that's stark. And I think that opening scene and kicking off with the action that they have immediately right off the bat, we're jumping into a fight between the Titans and these the minions belonging to Slade. Man, what a way to kick it off. I love again, one of those something that's probably a little bit more associated with Eastern animation, and that was in that fight scene. There's a lot of there's a particular part where Robin throws a birdarang, and you kind of follow the birdarang until it's attempting to hit one of the robots, and the background is completely blurred, so it gives you this idea that they're in motion, they're running. There's not a lot of detail or distraction on the background. It's just kind of this blurred background, but you follow the birdarang until it hits the robot. They kind of repeat that same thing again when the robots are going after Beast Boy, when he has the chip. So I love that, and that's something that's actually repeated, I know, throughout the show. Certainly heavily Eastern animation influence for that, but something that I felt like made that scene feel more intense. Because even though you have that stark white background to kick things off, it's not distracting during the chase. It adds and clearly lays out that this is a fast-paced, fast-moving fight that's happening. And you get a little bit of the shaky cam and all that stuff in there too. But a really great scene. And then the next background that I noticed, I guess a lot of the backgrounds, maybe something I hadn't noticed before, but they have this weird, almost like paintbrush stroke to them, and that's really apparent in the scene, that the first scene right out of the credits, where Starfire falls off the cliff and Robin has to jump off the cliff to save her. And there's this background that the characters are solid and stand off, jump off the screen, because these backgrounds, you can almost see the brush strokes in the way that the painted backgrounds look, and it just adds such a unique flavor to this series. And then the next scene, when you see the Titans tower, it's the same thing. The tower's there, but then the background has those brush strokes to them. So something unique that I don't feel I picked up before, that I think really sets this apart from some of the other shows that we tend to review from time to time. So a thumbs up for that too, because I feel like it's unique, and it's a unique kind of signature for the backgrounds for this series.
Absolutely. And I mean, speaking of backgrounds, the final chase scene of the episode, where Slade and Robin are chasing over running over the rooftops, and they land on this building, and there's this big, bright red neon sign right out of, a kung fu movie or something with Chinese characters on it, which I believe I read translates to read comics, which I think is a fun little awesome hidden message. But yeah, and then it's a lot of this big bright red neon sign, and then you just see Robin and Slade silhouettes against it fighting. I think we talked about this in our first episode when we reviewed Final Exam, but when Slade is in his lair, it's I guess not monochrome, but there's two colors. It's like everything is either in shadow or it has this orange hue to it.
Dual
Both
chrome?
Slade.
What is that? Bichrome? Dual chrome?
Bichrome sounds maybe
Bichromial?
Bichromial? I think that's it. That's it. But
yeah.
I think we puzzled it out of here, but yeah, I love that look of it as well. It's like we don't really get to see much of Slade's lair in these early episodes, but you just see him kind of, the one half of his body is completely covered in shadow, and then the right side with it, has the mask and a little bit of his that side of his body sort of illuminated or outlined in orange as well. So yeah, just the different shades and color palettes they use throughout this episode, and as you said, specifically in the backgrounds, I think really does create a really interesting atmosphere, especially because for other parts, yeah, they're in a sewer or they're in the subway systems, like that's pretty standard superhero fare, but to mix it up with these like really bright neon colors in the end battle, or as you mentioned, that scene where Robin is being dragged and carrying Starfire, and they're flying over the water, and it's kind of that like twilight time of day, so you get these like purples and oranges in the sky, as you mentioned, with that sort of almost brushstroke style of background. It really stands out, and yeah, I think that definitely deserves an extra nod for this week.
Yeah, I think that scene, as you mentioned, even the chase scene across the rooftops, I loved how that was set up between Slade and Robin. I love what about the Red X design? I think the Red X design is tremendous. It's unique. He has a cape. It isn't a big red, pun intended, red shiny arrow saying, look, this is Robin in disguise. There's nothing about it that really says there's Robin other than maybe the cape, but it's just a cool design. I love the visuals when the first battle with the Titans where he's shooting the X's out of his hands. I love that they affect each Titan a different way. The one, when it hits Beast Boy, as you mentioned, it sort of manifests as this gummy like substance that sticks him to the ground, and you get this really cool bit where Beast Boy tries to shapeshift between different animals to try and break free. He's like a gorilla one moment and a bird the next, and then he's an elephant, and he keeps shifting in and out of frame to these different animals, and the gummy substance sort of seems to cover and continue to contain him. He shoots another X that lands on Raven's mouth, so she has this giant, it's almost like red duct tape or something across her face for the next scene or so. And then he slaps an X on the back of Cyborg during one of the fights, which causes him to short circuit. And then I love in the next scene where they have that battle in the subway, where it's not only obvious based on the fact that they didn't get their butts handed to them as much, but there were visual clues to show that they had learned and adapted from their previous battles. So Raven steps in to try and deflects, one of the flying X's from hitting Starfire, and Cyborg himself has sort of evolved and is not affected the same way as when Red X drops the X on his back. And so I love that there was, the fact that there was growth even between just a couple scenes to show that this cohesive unit works together and that they are a team. They work together as a reason why they function as a unit, and they're able to learn and adapt. And yeah, I could honestly probably talk about a whole bunch of things for the visuals for the next 20 to 30 minutes. I love that Robin's lair and his little room sort of lends to this obsession with all of the clips all over the wall, and the spotlight, just one single spotlight on this desk, and him just kind of sulking in there, obsessing over just who Slade is. And that was a shot that they kept returning to a couple different times, these various different news clips up on the wall. But yeah, just a lot of fun this week. Lots of great visuals, and I think that final fight, having them lit by the red from that glow from that neon sign, man, it just felt like the culmination of a movie. I just loved it. Just added to the intensity of the fight between Robin and Slade. And and then when Robin drops off the building and Slade, at the last second, you see Slade's hand swoop in and snatch him. Just really awesome. Things things beyond that stood out. There's a point where they give you Cyborg's point of view as he's scanning the room, and you get the red eye. I think I'll just stop there and say that I think that it's a really good, fun episode, and the animation matches the action. And right from the get-go, you get great animation from the start, in the fights, and it continues throughout. There's 4 fight scenes during this show too, and that's a lot of action, a lot of stuff you had to animate, and I don't think they missed a beat, in my opinion. So that's why I ended up giving visuals and animation a perfect 10 out of 10.
Love it. Yeah, I gave it the exact same score of 10 out of 10. One note, I think you touched on it during the subway fight, and it's definitely shown there. I love how, and I know certainly from listening to commentaries and watching the special features about how leery the main DCAU team was of taking up the Justice League show, because of we have to animate 7 main characters at once on screen, and what a challenge that that poses. And so I loved that, as you pointed out, it's not just they're all off punching someone in their own little corner. Like, they're constantly getting involved in each other's fights. Right from in that first scene, one of Slade's minions, they have these like it looks like brass knuckles, but there's a laser on it, and he shoots it at the ceiling, and this panel is going to fall on Starfire, and Robin just swoops in and pushes her out of the way, and then later it's kind of played as a joke. But there's a moment where this one of the robots comes after Raven, and she's kind of in a disadvantage. As powerful as Raven is, she's not a fist fighter necessarily, so they kind of get her, and she's blocking a couple of the shots, and then kind of gets outmaneuvered, and Beast Boy saves her and is kind of mocking her that he got one over on her, and then immediately she's able to uses a couple of giant pieces of debris to crush another robot that was about to attack Beast Boy from behind. So yeah, just the camaraderie illustrated even during the fight scenes, I think, is really cool, and how well they work as a team is quite a bit of fun. And yeah, it's a great bit. And my one last note for visuals, I will say, is you mentioned that Robin's lair where he's looking. There's just this one shot, I think the first time we go in, when Starfire is first trying to talk to him, where he's at the table, and there's just this kind of slow panning 360 shot where it sort of shows us some of the newspaper clippings, and then sort of moves around until we're looking directly at Robin, and then we see the door open and Starfire's in the doorway. I just thought that was, again, a really nice little bit of that moody, again, that sort of obsessed detective motif that they're kind of going for Robin in this episode. It's really, really well done. And to do that sort of camera trick, that sort of 3D 360 thing in animation, I know is not easy at all for the animators themselves, or for if you're trying to storyboard that could be quite difficult as well. So yeah, a lot of extra little flourishes in this week's episode, even in some of the quieter moments.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. I think it shows up in the scores, why we ended up giving the scores that we did. And yeah, it's different. As we always say when we cover any show that isn't DCAU, it's different. And it's not what you're necessarily typically used to, but it's good. It's good in a different way. So definitely go out of your way to check this one out if you haven't. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. As you mentioned, the great Michael McQuistion, a DCAU veteran, is present here for doing the composition for this week's music, which I got to say, when I was listening to it, I was like, this sounds like a Batman Beyond soundtrack. That makes a whole lot of sense once you know that Michael McQuistion was responsible for the music.
Yeah, it's interesting because it goes through a couple different. It's a very moody episode, again, I think, to match the moody tone of Robin's mood throughout it. But from kind of at the start, you get more maybe what you consider the traditional, more rocked up music as the Titans are fighting those minions, and then right when the robot shoots Starfire and she begins to fall, and then it jumps out of the window and hits the Iron Man rocket boots and starts to fly away, and we see Robin run out to the ledge and look down at Starfire and look up. We get this like choir music, sort of like this chanting, or this sort of low chanting coming in, and then the drums come back in, and then the sort of more like the power chords start, and we get a little more of that like wailing guitar in that sequence, and which then sort of transitions again to that more frenetic, high-paced, faster music as he's actually going on the chase with all of them. And then I thought again that final Slade chase scene on the rooftops, especially, it's so that piece of music is so drum and bass motivated. Like there is guitar as well, but it's so rhythm motivated because it's this frantic thing, and Robin's chasing after him, and he's constantly, seems like he's close enough that he can almost touch it, but then Slade gets out of reach again. I just thought it did a really good job overall of just adding to the mood of a lot of these, especially these big action sequences.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the tempo is very high throughout. It does let it breathe in various spots where it needs to, whether you're in Robin's room or when you have the conversations between Red X and Slade. Certainly, there's some breathing room in there, but as we said, it's a very high energy, high action episode, so that called for a soundtrack that was there to match. I don't think that there was anything, again, it didn't feel unique in any way from another Michael McQuistion composition. It's a slow and steady, solid defender. Like it's not somebody that's going to be your superstar on your sports team, but it's somebody that's going to be there for a while and do its job every single day. So I didn't think it stood out. It did what it needed to do, and I think it certainly didn't take away from anything. If anything, it probably added to the general mood of those high energy scenes. But that's basically what was asked of it, and I feel like it's did its job. So that's why I ended up giving music a 6 out of 10 for this week. No unique Red X theme that I heard necessarily. That maybe could have bumped it up a couple of points, but generally speaking, it was scene setting music. It did its job, in my opinion, and that's why I ended up giving it a 6 out of 10.
Nice. Yeah, I'm a couple of points higher. I did go with an 8 out of 10. Just for what we've already talked about. I just thought the action sequences are so driven by, I think, the percussion, and certainly I appreciate that as a drummer myself. So I appreciated like how rhythm focused a lot of the music was, and how that added to the big action sequences. And then it's like I said, there's some sounds like some chanting or a choir was brought in, but there's also like this really light ethereal like synthesizers. We're actually right at the start. The episode opens and we're just looking at this rotating computer chip in the middle of this stasis field, and then we see the Slade minion reach out to grab it, and then he looks over and sees Robin, and it transitions right into the more action focused music. And there's this just some really interesting crescendos, I think, there as they sort of reveal the full team for the first time in the episode. And then for all the stuff I mentioned, I think it does just a great job of adding to that, and again, sort of the quieter moments as well as those big action pieces.
There we go. All right, Liam, let's wrap it up this week with our final category, which of course is going to be our voice acting. Of course, if you're familiar with the Teen Titans or perhaps Teen Titans Go, you'll be familiar with the main cast here, but it's definitely, as this is only our second venture into the world of the Teen Titans here, it's definitely worth another review of some of these core main players here. But other than that, I know it's not a huge cast, but let's get into this week's voice acting.
Yeah, it's a very small cast. It's just our 5 Titans and our main villain of the piece. But yes, we do have, of course, the great Ron Perlman as Slade once again here. We've talked about him once before. He was sort of in the background as Slade in the previous episode, but of course, we've already talked about him in his voicing of Clayface in Batman the Animated Series, and several other voice acting roles over the years. And he just really, again, like day one, nailed exactly what you need for that design. I think especially when that character is in shadow and he just has this he's never yelling. He's not doing the grandiose villain, even, especially I think comparing him, which I think it makes sense that I would, because of our show, like I compare him to the Clayface performance, which is so, he's loud and he's yelling and he's a thespian, literally. That character is an actor. And so it makes sense that he's very loud and over the top, whereas the Slade is just the man who's constantly in control and constantly not fazed by anything. And so I think Ron Perlman as Slade in this episode, not surprisingly perhaps, but just really, really nailing it.
Yeah, he's really good, unsurprisingly. And as you mentioned, it is a very different performance. He's cocky, and his Clayface is definitely cocky, but this is a arrogant, confident, cocky, and very understated. He's very cool. He's very calm. He's very, he doesn't have to be boisterous. He doesn't have to be over the top. He knows that he's a bad mamma jamma, I guess, and he doesn't have to. That's the first for in 212 episodes that phrase is used. But yeah, he knows that he's the baddest guy in the room, and he doesn't have to prove it. Like that's the general feeling that I get from his performance and he enjoys the sort of torturous toying that he does with Robin, that he's in control, he's got the power, and that very much comes out in the performance, especially in that final reveal as Robin feels like he's finally bested him, only for it to be revealed that he's once again his princess is in another castle, you might say.
Absolutely. And just tremendous job from Mr. Perlman. And then our main Titans cast, which are really the only other voice actors to speak of course, we have Kari Payton as Cyborg, we have Tara Strong, never heard of her, as Raven. We of course have Greg Sipes as Beast Boy. All three of them kind of in the background of this episode. Like we said, there's some comedy with Beast Boy getting his having to get his hair cut after the first Red X encounters, as well as Raven having to sort of get the like she's getting a wax piece of wax or something removed. She's waxing her mustache or something. She gets the X removed and has to sort of just do that deadpan ow as Cyborg removes that, and then Cyborg himself doesn't really get a ton to do. Again, you get a little bit of the banter and the joking back and forth between those three, but the main cast this week, it's really a two-person show in that it's obviously we have Scott Manville as Robin, who is again the driving force of this episode, and certainly we'll get to him in a moment. But then we of course also have Hynden Walsh as Starfire, and again, as fast-paced and as many action sequences as you said are in this episode, kind of constantly cutting back for, even if it's only 30 seconds or a minute-long scene of Starfire, first reacting to Robin and speaking to Robin, and then later on the rest of the Titans are kind of complaining about how Robin's been missing and has hurt the team by not being around, and she's sort of leaps to his defense and is sure that he's doing the right thing and he's working hard, harder than anyone, and then to her sort of shock and horror when she realizes that he's been lying to them the whole time, and then as we already talked about, that very final scene of the episode where she kind of puts him in his place and leaves him with this observation that he and Slade are very much alike, is she's really good in this episode.
Yeah, she again, she's sort of like the female Beast Boy. I feel like at times she's used for more comic relief. There's less opportunity for her to be more serious, and obviously the whole point, her character has a heart of gold and has this innocence about her, and enjoyment and lust for life and everything that comes with that Starfire character on the Teen Titans show. But I think it's interesting that this point, especially that final scene between her and Mr. Menville's Robin, she really gets to be vulnerable and show that innocence, much like the innocence of a child that she sort of uses as comedic relief at times, and not understanding Earth customs and all that same innocence that children have, that she sort of represents, can also feel betrayal, can feel hurt, can feel and be open and honest and really cut to your core in a way that a more mature adult may not. And it hurts a little bit more. And her honesty, her brutal honesty, and her willingness to point out that Robin and Slade acted exactly the same way in the way that he treated his friends. Man, her ability to come out and portray in that scene that emotion, along with her sort of working through the story as she's the first one to discover that Robin and Red X are one and the same, sort of the surprise and putting the puzzle pieces together, and her concern that she has for Robin throughout, and his withdrawal. I love that. She does a great job. And again, for maybe not the typical role that she had in this first season, or that you maybe think of when you think of her performances in this Teen Titans, or that character in the Teen Titans. I love that she had an opportunity here to really sort of flex those acting muscles and show a different side of this character. And I felt knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, like we talked about, it's just she that innocence, as you said, really I think works to the advantage, even though it is often used for comedy. In this episode, it's also showing that even though she is sort of has a very, you could argue, simplistic worldview of good and evil, certainly, but she, her observations of what makes Robin and Slade similar, I think are really, really cutting, and Miss Walsh does a great job of delivering those lines. And yeah, as mentioned, we have Scott Menville, the Robin of the hour. Scott Menville, again, we talked about him before, but obviously this episode, this is really the whole this is the whole enchilada. If you're talking about a Scott Menville Robin performances, you get the serious, gravelly, like a little, he's got like teenage Clint Eastwood voice for a lot of it, and then you have him just like yelling at the top of his lungs for a lot of it when he's holding on for dear life, as he's holding Starfire and also holding on to the rope that's attached to the flying robot, and then the fights with Slade, and Slade again being Rob Perlman being so calm and taunting and sinister, while you have this increasingly agitated Robin and Scott Menville on the other side of it. Just a lot of fun letting him not only play off the other Titans as mentioned, but him and Ron Perlman together in this episode, just really making magic.
Yeah, absolutely. And we didn't talk about who voices Red X. Oh, that's right. Also Scott with a great voice modulator on. Yeah, tremendous. He had a lot to do. I think that the typical Robin stuff that you think of, maybe if you've watched the Teen Titans series, you can take or leave, and I know there are people that can take it or leave it, and but I know that for me, I think it was the same thing for this. The quieter moments, the downbeats, the times where he's having these conversations with Starfire and being really raw and really open with his emotion and frustration, and not being able to get his hands around Slade, or what Slade wants, or what Slade's motivation is, or who he is. Those moments, I feel like, again, reveal a deeper layer than just the Titans Go screaming side that he so often was sort of pigeonholed into for a lot of the maybe what your mental memory banks go to for the Robin for this series. So being reminded that, there were other moments that he had opportunities to evoke other emotion and share those acting chops a little bit. Again, I love that. This is a perfect showcase for that. And even with a voice modulator on, I thought his Red X was pretty good too. And the tone that he took with Slade and speaking to him in a couple of those scenes. So yeah, I think this is a really solid performance by everybody across the board. Certainly Mr. Perlman, with maybe the most episode defining, just from the sheer evilness of his voice, and again the pompous arrogance of being able to toy with not only the entire Titans, but with Robin. And then, of course, the arrogance that he has in figuring out who Red X is before everybody else is really good too. So for all those reasons, I gave voice acting a really strong 9 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I gave it the exact same score of 9 out of 10 for just all the reasons we've already talked about. It's just our main cast and our, one of our main villains. It isn't a huge ensemble here, but everybody pulls their weight, and those top 3, if you will, of Hynden Walsh, Ron Perlman, and Scott Manville just all really knock it out of the park.
There we go. All right, Liam. Well, that would begin to total up this week's episode, and totaling everything up on my end here, I end up with a very strong 34 out of 40. What about you?
Yeah, and I am. I think we were maybe 1 point off in a couple different categories, but that did lead me to a little bit higher of a final score in 37 out of 40.
All right. Well, that puts us in our top picks area here, which I got to say, sometimes I'm not surprised, because some of these Elseworlds episodes, we tend to pick the more memorable episodes, which will then lead to a higher score at times. But I think for a show that has as many seasons as Teen Titans had, and as many memorable moments, that's well deserving. And so I guess we can talk about rewatchability, Liam. And this feels like a no-brainer. I feel like this is like a 1 second answer. This is a must watch because of everything that the series entails, and the fact that the Red X saga continues later on in the series.
Absolutely, yeah. It's a great episode on its own, but when we talk about the rewatchability, it's as we mentioned, a huge linchpin episode for this ongoing Slade saga. And as you mentioned, the Red X, while this is the last time Robin plays Red X, this is not the last time Red X appears in this series. So definitely a lot of stuff here that comes back later on. So definitely easily 2 thumbs up for rewatchability this week.
Absolutely. Well, Liam, that will begin to wrap us up for this week. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, if you're looking to support the podcast, you can do so by definitely following us on social media at DCAU Review, both over on Twitter and Instagram. If you want to converse with us, Twitter is the best way to do that. Liam does an awesome job of running our Twitter account. You can reach out to us. Lots of conversations happen on there. We're getting some new listeners this month. So if this is your first time listening to the show, also, thank you so much for spending this time with us. If you want to support the podcast, if you liked what you heard, subscribe, of course, on your favorite podcast app. You can also, if you listen to us on Apple Podcasts, you can leave a review, a little blurb that helps people learn what you liked about us, what brought you here, and let the good people know what it was that you enjoyed about the podcast. You can also, of course, leave a 5-star review on Spotify if you listen there. There's also some interactive questions that are exclusive to our Spotify listeners, so you can check those out. Check out the poll and then the weekly question. We love getting feedback from you guys. A couple other ways to support the pod. You can head over to DCAUreview.com and click on the shop tab if you want to pick up a piece of merch. You can also use the link at the bottom of our Anchor site, or it's usually posted wherever you hear your podcasts. There's a link that you can support us directly financially if you'd like to. You can also, as we mentioned at the beginning of the pod, head over to youtube.com/thepodtower. That's another free way to support us if you subscribe to us and like our videos when we post them. Even if you don't listen to the episodes there fully, it's a big help to us and drives more listeners to the pod. Liam, it's enough plugging of shameless plugs for this week for how to support us. Let's give the good people a preview about what we'll be covering next week in our second week of our Robin's Elseworld month.
That's right. So we'll be jumping over to another new series, as we will every week this month. And next week, we are going back to a show we've covered quite a few times. Maybe that might be our most frequent Elseworld appearance maker to date. But we are returning to the world of Batman, the Brave and the Bold once again to see an episode that focuses on, of course, who else but Robin himself, the introduction of Robin to that Brave and the Bold series in a very memorable episode entitled The Color of Revenge.
Man, I love that one. Again, I have not seen most of, if not all of, Batman Brave and the Bold. So every time we watch one of these episodes, it's a brand new experience for me. I know that I feel like over the last couple of years, Batman the Brave and the Bold has begun to gain traction and people recognizing it for the just the fantastic, amazing piece of art that it is. As we're going to talk about Mr. James Tucker, DCAU veteran, and currently working on the next iteration of Batman animation with DCAU legend Bruce Timm, of course, coming up here with Batman Caped Crusader, but his love letter to that Silver Age and just lots of fun that we had with every episode that we've reviewed so far. So I cannot wait. It's going to be a great time.
Absolutely.
But until then, I'm Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we'll talk to you on the next episode of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.